For a long stretch of company history, managers were not a side detail in World Wrestling Entertainment. They were part of the engine. A great manager could talk for a wrestler who was not yet a polished speaker, add heat to a villain, explain a character in seconds, and make an entrance feel bigger before a punch was ever thrown. In many eras, the manager was not just there to stand at ringside. He was the translator, the salesman, the agitator, and sometimes the entire reason an act worked in the first place. That is what makes their disappearance so interesting. Wrestling managers did not vanish overnight, and they did not disappear because they were useless. In fact, the company's own history makes the opposite point. World Wrestling Entertainment has repeatedly celebrated managers as some of the most influential figures it ever had, with names like Bobby Heenan, Jimmy Hart, Freddie Blassie, Lou Albano, Paul Bearer, and Slick treated as major parts of the company's mythology. The company has also highlighted how powerful the right manager-client pairing could be, which tells you how central that role once was. In older eras, a manager was often a star-making device. He could take a wrestler with presence but limited microphone skills and turn him into a complete television act. That was especially important in a company built on strong characters. Not every wrestler needed to be a great talker if someone dangerous, obnoxious, or charismatic could do the talking for him. Bobby Heenan made this role famous. Paul Bearer did it in a completely different way with The Undertaker. Jimmy Hart could make almost any act louder, more polished, and more irritating in exactly the way the company wanted. Managers gave performers an extra layer, and in some cases, they gave them their entire voice. That was not decoration, that was structure. But the very reason managers once mattered so much also helps explain why they became rarer. Over time, World Wrestling Entertainment changed the kind of performer it wanted to build around. The more the company emphasized wrestlers who could speak for themselves, carry long live promos, and connect directly with the audience, the less necessary a traditional manager became. The company's own celebrations of the greatest talkers in wrestling history make that shift easy to understand. In a promotion where microphone ability became one of the clearest markers of main event value, the ideal star was increasingly someone who did not need a spokesperson at all. If the wrestler could sell the match, explain the character, and command the crowd alone, the old manager role naturally started to shrink. There was also a presentation shift. In the classic manager-heavy years, managers often served as a shortcut to character definition. They told the audience who a wrestler was. They amplified the gimmick. They gave the act a framework. But as television presentation evolved, the company found more direct ways to do that. Wrestlers got more promo time. Video packages became more polished. Reality-based programming later gave audiences access to performers outside the ring. By the 2010s, World Wrestling Entertainment was not just selling matches, it was selling personalities across television, documentaries, digital media, and reality shows like Total Divas and Total Bellas. In that environment, the company had more ways to build a performer than simply assigning a manager. That matters because managers once filled an information gap. They helped explain characters when the show had fewer tools for doing that. Once the company had more hours of programming, more polished production, and more ways to present talent directly, the need for a full-time mouthpiece became less constant. The manager did not stop being useful, the manager just stopped being essential. There is also a creative reason. A manager works best when he clearly adds something the wrestler does not already have. If the wrestler already has presence, promo ability, and a fully defined persona, a manager can start to feel redundant instead of helpful. That is one reason modern managers tend to stand out only when they are attached to very specific acts. Paul Heyman is the clearest example. He does not feel like a throwback simply because he talks well. He feels special because he still performs the classic manager function at the highest level. He adds gravity, framing, and menace to the people he represents. When a manager still appears in modern World Wrestling Entertainment, it usually works because the company is treating that role as a feature, not as a standard piece of roster construction. And that may be the clearest answer of all. Talent managers became rarer because the company stopped treating them as a normal requirement and started treating them as a specialty tool. In older eras, a roster could be full of managers because the company relied on them constantly. In the modern era, a manager has to justify his presence much more specifically. He has to elevate an act in a way the wrestler, the writing, and the production cannot already do on their own. So why did wrestling managers disappear from World Wrestling Entertainment? The most responsible answer is this. They faded because the company evolved into a product that increasingly preferred stars who could speak directly for themselves, while also developing many other ways to present character and personality. Managers did not become irrelevant. They became less necessary. The role survived, but the era of the manager as a near-standard part of the roster slowly gave way to an era where managers were the exception. In the end, that is why the disappearance of managers feels so noticeable. They were once one of the company's most reliable storytelling devices. They created stars, sharpened villains, and gave entire acts their voice. But as World Wrestling Entertainment changed, the manager stopped being a default setting and became a special attraction. That is not the same as extinction, but it is the end of an era.